Yeah, I'm so excited to be here with you. We're kicking off our new series today called Focus. And I'm going to tell you, this is going to let you in on a little secret here. I blame Twitter. And how's that for an attention grabber? Is everyone paying attention now? I blame Twitter, I do. I don't blame Twitter maybe for some of the reasons that you might think I blame Twitter. I blame Twitter because seemingly when Twitter launched and with it their arbitrary 140 character limit, I guess it's since been doubled, but when Twitter seemed to launch, my attention span completely went out the window. And I could blame Twitter, but the reality is I see that in other areas of my life, whether it's a podcast or I'm watching a TV show or a movie or reading a book or even in conversation. It's the same theme. Like, give me the information I want, when I want it, how I want it, but keep it short and keep it concise. Like, it seems like over the last decade or two, I've lost my ability to maintain focus. And can anyone else relate to that? A few of us. For everyone else, you're just amazing human beings. Or you're lying. The reality is you're probably fooling yourself. In 2000, the Microsoft Corporation did probably one of the most quoted, sometimes most controversial studies when it comes to human attention spans. And the reason they picked 2000 was because that was kind of coincided with the emerging of the mobile internet generation. That's when we all started to get devices that were in our pocket, connected at all times. And so literally what they did is they assessed how long can the average American, or the average human being I should say, maintain their focus. And on average, they found about 12 seconds. That our attention spans in 2000 were about 12 seconds long. Now, they allowed that to kind of go by. 15 years went by. And in 2015, they decided to rerun the study with obviously new data now that we've been living in this mobile internet generation. And when they reran the study, what they found is our attention spans decreased by about 4 seconds. So it went from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. And it was that study that kind of came along with this buzzword or this tagline, that the goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds. As human beings, our attention span is less than goldfish. You guys ever hear that before? Anyone, right? Congratulations. We've done it. We've arrived. I did look. Does that make us like the shortest attention span in the world? No, they think fruit flies have shorter attention spans than we do. But we struggle with this. We struggle with maintaining our attention, maintaining focus. Now, there was an author named Joseph McCormick, and he wrote a book called Brief. And what McCormick did is he analyzed the lives of working professionals. And this is some of the things that he found, that the average working professional receives 304 emails every week. Can anyone relate to that? First service, someone was like, I wish I only received 304 emails every single week. But yeah, our inboxes, right? They just get bombarded, and it's not always important stuff. It's spam, it's other things, it's jokes, it just fills up our inboxes. They also found that the average working professional checks their smartphone about 150 times a day, which maybe seems crazy, but the reality is there's a feature on your phone where you could turn screen time on if you have an iOS device, and I think you'd be shocked at how many times you engage with your device on a daily basis. So all of this led McCormick to conclude this, and it's not really a surprise to any of us what I'm about to say, although sometimes when it's written in a book, it feels a whole lot more official than when someone says it. So this is what McCormick concluded: people's brains are taxed. I think we can relate to that. Our brains are taxed. Too many things are competing for our attention. There are too many things in our world that are vying for our attention. And this goes along with the age-old adage that those who scream the loudest get heard. There are things that are screaming loudly in our lives, demanding our attention. Things like our jobs. Our jobs want our attention. Our to-do list wants our attention. Our phones want our attention. The media wants our attention. Our spouses and our kids want our attention. Now, not everything that demands your attention is bad. This is just a hint. If it's your spouse or your kid, it's probably a good thing. Those are the things that are worthy of our attention. But the reality is, with all of these voices, with everything asking and demanding our attention, the reality is what happens is it drowns out that still small voice. of God. That in the craziness of life in our world, we can get so focused on the other things that we miss what God is doing in us and through us. We miss the voice of Jesus in our lives. And that's what we're going to be talking about, not just this morning, but throughout this series. How can we return? How can we return our focus on God? How can we return our focus to the work that he's doing in us? And how can we return our focus to the mission he has called us to? Now, for all the good and bad that this COVID season has brought, and I know even I say that, some of you are going to be like, did he really say that there was good in this COVID season? And the reality is, for some of us, there were some great things, some learning, some new opportunities in this COVID season. But there is one thing, one reality that has kind of proven itself to be true, proven itself to be pretty harmful, and that's actually people's spiritual lives. Throughout this COVID season, many of us have felt a disconnect. Many of us have felt a disconnection from God, from his faith community. We have filled our lives and our focus on other things. There's an organization known as the Barna Research Group. They're a faith-based think tank, and every year they release an annual State of the Church study. And so in 2018 they released a study, 2019 they released a study, 2020 they released a study, and some of the findings from the 2020 study were absolutely staggering. What they found was that a third of all practicing Christians, or 33% of Christ's followers, have completely disengaged from their faith community. They stopped attending church altogether. And I know that can be confusing because it looked different in different parts of the country with different regulations. And so this is like they stopped attending physically, or they stopped attending and connecting relationally in groups. They stopped attending through digital means, whether it was online. Like 33% of Christians in this country have found their focus on something else other than God in this season. Now, I want to be clear. I understand that you don't have to go to church to be a Christian. I totally get that. But what we find in some of these numbers is that the reality is people haven't replaced church with other parts in their faith journey or in their lives to help ensure they're growing. They've just disconnected altogether. And maybe that's something you can relate to. Like maybe you checked out for a season, and I've had some conversations with many of you that was part of your reality. Like when COVID hit, like this was like new and like crazy, and the church pivoted, and we had online services, and you were with us for a while, but then it just got kind of drug on, and it got, a little stale, and you figured out something else to do with your time, but you came back. And I've talked to people, and maybe they came back because they realized that something was missing in their lives. Maybe they checked out, but then life got disrupted. That has a way of happening to us, and so they came back. People checked out, but then God prodded, and people returned. And here's what I would want us to understand as we start this whole journey together through this series. It's time for us to return. It's time for us to return to the community of faith. It's time for us to return to Jesus. Now, I want to take a second here, and I just want to talk to our online audience. And so if you're in the room here, you get a pass for a moment. If you're staying at home because you are someone who finds themselves in the at-risk category, I want you to know I support you. And if you're staying at home because you're caring for someone who is in that at-risk category, and that's the safest thing to do, I support you. If you're staying home because you're a critical frontline worker who needs to be out on those front lines each and every day, and that's why you're staying home, I support you. As your pastor, I want you to know I'm behind you, and when you're ready, whether it's when things calm down or you get a vaccine, when the time is right, we will be excited to have you back. But I want you to know I support your decision to stay home. Now, if you're staying home because you like your pajamas, if you're staying home because you like church over breakfast and a warm cup of coffee, let me tell you, I get it. I totally get it. So we're coming up on Easter. By the way, on our website, lakesawyerchurch.org, we have our Easter services up, and we're doing reservations to ensure that we can get as many people in the services that we have. We'll have 5 services. All 5 will be online, 3 in-person services, 9, 10, 15, and 11:30. So that's all at lakesawyerchurch.org. Sign up for Easter. Be here. You're not going to miss it. But last Easter, Last Easter was the craziest experience of like my adult life. As long as I've been an adult, I have worked in some capacity in a church. And Easter's kind of a big deal. Easter, we call it the Super Bowl of church services. And so there's a lot of prayer and planning and everything to get Easter up and running and to pull it off. Well, this Easter, I had done something I've never done in my life before. I slept in. This past Easter, I slept in because we pre-recorded the service. I slept in. I got to experience Easter morning with my kids. I've never experienced an Easter morning with my kids. We got to sit down, enjoy breakfast, watch church together. It was incredibly convenient, and it was awesome. Like, I get it. I get why you choose to stay home. But here's what I would say. What is easiest is not often what is best. What is easiest is not often what is best. And if you're staying home because it's simply convenient, it's time for you to come back. It's time for you to return. And maybe you're thinking, why? Like, why do I need to return? Why is it important for me to sit in these hard plastic chairs when I can sit in the comfy couch at home? And here's what I would say. Because each and every one of us who've placed our lives in Christ are image bearers of God. And in community, through our lives, we reflect God to one another. And collectively, as his image bearers, live out our lives and our faith, we become encouragements to one another. Your presence helps keep Jesus at the forefront and in focus in someone else's life, and they do the same for you. We don't want you here in this building so we can count you as a number in person. We want you here because God designed us to be in community with each other. God designed us to be in relationship, that we grow faster and farther together than we ever grow by ourselves at home. And so it's time for you to return. Now, to all of us, losing our focus on God, this is an age-old problem. In the book of Hebrews, we actually see some of the struggle and the debate play out before our very eyes. In chapter 9 of Hebrews, the writer draws a distinction between the old and the new covenant. Now, if you're new to church, let me just take a quick second to give you a frame of reference here. The Bible is divided into two parts. The first half of the Bible is what's known as the Old Testament. And the Old Covenant sort of encapsulates the Old Testament. The New Testament, and through the work of Jesus, we find the ushering in of the New Covenant. So very simplistic terms, Old Testament, Old Covenant, New Testament, New Covenant. Well, in the Old Testament, we see the people of Israel. They were God's chosen people. They were Old Covenant people. And with that came a whole host of issues that centered around worship and access to God. How you could worship and who could have access to God. And we see some of this unfold beginning in chapter 9, verse 1. Now, the first covenant, in reference to the old covenant, now the first covenant had regulations for worship and also an earthly sanctuary. Essentially, what the author wants us to know is that with the old covenant came all sorts of, again, regulations of who could worship, how it looks, who had access. But also, there was a whole list of what this had to look like, what the earthly sanctuary, which is another way of saying the tabernacle, which is like a house of worship, like church, like what everything had to look like, how everything had to be arranged for worship to take place. It had to be set just perfectly. And then we see that kind of play out. If you go back afterwards, you see that he kind of describes the author in verses 2 through 5, what that looks like. But then in verse 6, we read this. When everything had been arranged like this, when everything had been placed just like it was supposed to, the priest entered regularly into the outer room to carry on their ministry. But only the high priest entered the inner room, and that only once a year, and never without blood, which he offered for himself and for the sins the people had committed in ignorance. Only the high priest was allowed access into what is known as the Holy of Holies. And here's why this is significant. For the people of Israel, their ability to find connection with, their ability to focus on God was entirely contingent upon someone else. Access was through One person. It was through the holy priest. This is what they relied on. But things are changing. We continue in chapter 10 and verse 11. Day after day, every priest stands and performs his religious duties. Day after day, it's sort of the outer area. These priests are performing their religious duties. Again and again, they're offered the same sacrifice, which could never take away sins. The priests would offer these sacrifices because they believed that maybe these sacrifices would appease God. Maybe these sacrifices would take away the punishment of sins. Maybe their efforts would cause something to change. But again and again, they found the same experience. But something did change. Something changed forever. Through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, through the ushering in of a new covenant, things would be different. People could worship differently. People could access God like they've never been able to access God before. Verse 12. But when this priest, a reference to Jesus, when this priest have offered for all time one sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God, and since that time he waits for his enemies to be made his footstool. Verse 14, for by one sacrifice, he has made perfect forever those who are being made holy. That through Jesus' sacrifice, when Jesus offered his life on the cross, that once and for all, he paid the punishment for our sins. And I love what verse 14 reminds us. That it's because of Jesus' sacrifice that we have been made perfect forever. That we have been made holy in the eyes of God. Now, this is an important distinction. We are not perfect. We know this. Like our spouses know this. Like our family. We know that we aren't perfect. But because of what Jesus has done, in God's eyes, we are. In God's eyes, we are flawless. We are unblemished. Because Jesus changed everything. And that's why we say this around here at Lake Sawyer. If you've been around Lake Sawyer, you've probably heard us say this before. If you're new here, you're going to hear it say us a lot. But Jesus changes everything for everyone. And no matter what your life has been, no matter what your life has looked like, when Jesus enters your life, when you surrender your heart and your life to him, he changes everything for you. He changes everything for everyone. And we want people to experience that reality. We want people to experience the transformation that is possible because of what Jesus has done. The writer continues in verse 19. Therefore, brothers and sisters, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way opened for us through the curtain that is his body. Now, there is a lot that is going on right here, and it might be a bit hard to track what's going on. So I just want to press pause here for a second and have us walk through it. One of the first things the writer says that is significant is that we have, really what he says, we have confidence to enter into the most holy place. That word confidence, another way to say it is that we have the assurance, we have boldness to enter into the presence of God. Now again, in the Old Testament, in the Old Covenant, not everyone had access to that. It was only the high priest, again, who could go into the Holy of Holies. It was only the high priest that could enter into the presence of God. And if you remember, that priest never entered with boldness. The priests never entered with confidence. They had blood, they had sacrifices. They were trying to do what they could to appease God because they weren't sure if God would receive them. But what the writer of Hebrews is saying is this is different. This is totally different. That you, I, all of us who've placed our lives in Jesus, we can step into the most holy presence of God with boldness and assurance because, not what we have done, but because of what Jesus has done for us. Because Jesus changed everything. Because his sacrifice in his body changed our ability to access God and what that looked like. Our access to God would no longer be separated by a curtain. And in the Old Testament, in the temple, the most holy of holies was separated by a curtain. No longer would a curtain separate us from the presence of God, but God's presence is now being made available to us through the body and blood of Jesus. That's powerful. That's transformative. This is, again, it's completely changed how people approach God. The Old Testament, and for the people of Israel, really access to God was about religion. It was about structure. It was about process. It was about certain things happening in a certain way. But because of what Jesus has done, that is no longer true. That our access and ability to connect and focus on God is hinged on a relationship with him. That as we center our lives and our focus and our minds on Jesus, we experience the fullness of God. The writer continues in verse 21, and it's an odd statement. And since we have a great priest, again referencing Jesus, and since we have a great priest over the house of God, this is important. I just want to highlight, because this is a transitional statement. Essentially, what the author is saying is, in light of everything we've talked about, in light of these two realities of the old covenant and the new covenant, and the old way how people access God, and the new way how you can access God, in light of all of this, then this is then how we should respond. Verse 21 transitions from where we were to how we respond, considering what Jesus has done for us. And this is what we read in verse 22. In light of all that, let us draw near to God with sincere hearts and with the full assurance that faith brings, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience, and having our bodies washed with pure water. Verse 23, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Three things that I want us to talk about. Verse 22, let us draw near. Verse 23, let us hold on to hope. Verse 24, let's encourage one another on towards love and good deeds. Let us draw near to God. Let us hold on to hope. Let us encourage one another towards love and good deeds. And this is why it's important. This is why we should do this in light of what Jesus has done. Because doing these things will cause us to center Jesus in our lives. It will cause us to focus on him instead of the other things that are constantly competing and demanding for our attention. So let's just take a second to talk about each of these. The first idea is that we are to draw near. Verse 22, that we are to draw near. And what I want us to understand here is that it's not God who's doing the drawing. Like, God is present, God is with us, that God is in our world. What the writer of Hebrews wants us to understand, that it's our job to intentionally draw near to him, that we need to focus our hearts and our minds on him, that he needs to become our priority. And so much of that is not just hearts and minds, but it's action. Like, how much of our lives or our days are built around things that help us connect with the heart of God. Like, if we want Jesus to be in the focus at all times, then we need to build our lives around the relationship that matters the most. And guys, I get it that this is easier said than done. Like, I get that it's easy to say, like, we should just build our lives around Jesus and it's just gonna be a piece of cake. But I know that life is hectic. That we as people, we get busy, we get overwhelmed. And in those difficult times, in the midst of everything we deal with in life, it's hard to draw near to God, but also as a result of what we experience, it's hard for us to remain hopeful. Throughout this past year, throughout COVID, and we're not like, it's still here with us, like, it's been difficult to find hope in the midst of this season. It's been difficult for us to stay engaged in this season, which is why verse 23 is so critical, that we have to be committed to holding on to hope, because in Jesus Christ, we have hope. That no matter what we're experiencing, we have hope. And Peter tells us all about it. Look what the Apostle Peter writes in 1 Peter chapter 1, beginning in verse 3. He says, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into what? A living hope. Because of his birth, he's given us, because of this, he's given us a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. I mean, Peter reminds us that our hope is found in the resurrection of Jesus. It is rooted in an inheritance that cannot be taken away from us. It is rooted in a promise of eternity. That no matter how fractured our world becomes, no matter how chaotic our lives become, we can take heart because he, Jesus, has overcome the world. It is this commitment to hope that allows us to move our focus from the problem that's in front of us. And we're human. There's that temptation. We do this, right? Like there's a problem, we focus on the problem in front of us. And then that problem resolves, and there's another problem, and we focus on the problem in front of us. Can you relate to this? We focus on the problem in front of us. But when we hold on to the hope of Jesus, it moves our focus from the problem in front of us to the God who is with us. And we can get through whatever it is that we're going through if we're holding on to the God who's with us instead of focusing on the problem in front of us. Hold on to hope. But then the last thing he says in verse 24, the writer reminds us to spur one another on, to encourage one another towards love and good deeds. Guys, love doesn't just happen. Like in relationships, there's always a commitment. There's always a choice to love. And that's why the writer here, he's saying like, consider this. Consider loving one another. Make the choice to love one another and to spur each other on to good works. Like we collectively are choosing, and we should choose to love our faith community, to love the people that God has assembled here at Lake Sawyer, to love the person to your right and to your left, or 2 rows behind you, or 2 rows in front of you. Love them not because you agree with everything they say or do. Love them because they are a child of God, just like you, and God has brought us together for the mutual benefit of one another. Now, this passage gets abused. This passage gets weaponized. And so what I want us to understand is what the writer is calling us to is an act of self-sacrifice. That it's not something where we say to someone else, well, your job is to love me. Your job is to do good works for me. What the author is saying is that it's our job to surrender our own wants and needs, to sacrifice ourselves in the loving service of someone else. That we serve through our love and our deeds other people, and they in turn serve us. All throughout the Bible, really in the New Testament, Jesus constantly leads through the model of mutual submission. That we submit to one another as we submit to God above all else in service of humanity, in a call to leverage what Jesus has done for us into the lives of one another. This is not something someone else is supposed to do for you. This is something you are called to do for someone else. And this spurring and the call to hold on to hope and the unquenchable desire to focus on God brings everything back around where it should have been all along. It brings our hearts and our minds and our focus around God. And we do this together as a community because like I said at the beginning, individually we reflect God into the lives of others. And collectively we encourage, uplift, and help one another focus on him. And guys, that is the heart behind this series. That's what we're going to be talking about. How do we return our focus to Jesus? How do we return to what he's doing in us? And how do we return to our focus on the mission that he's trying to live out through us? And we're going to talk about that, but we're also going to spend this next season through our 21 days of prayer and fasting, using that opportunity to bring us back together, to bring us back focused on Jesus. Now I want to tell you, as a pastor, I have been blown away by the amount of people who signed up for the 21 days of prayer and fasting. But I also recognize there's some of us who we're a little late to the party. Like, we like to sign up at the last possible moment to engage. And I also understand that there's some people who are like, I just don't know enough about it yet to sign up, to commit to do something for 21 days. So I just want to take a few minutes to talk to you about what this 21 days of prayer and fasting will really look like. First off, when you sign up, and I really hope that each and every one of you would sign up. When you sign up, you will basically sign up to receive by email and or text, you can decide, a daily prayer focus and topic. And so every morning you'll receive something in your inbox that will say, here's a topic that I want you to pray about. Here's a verse that you could be praying along with that. And our pastors have put together about 1 to 2 minute devotionals to go along with each of these days to help us understand the text a little bit more and help us engage in that a little bit deeper. And then every Wednesday, we're going to have an optional Zoom prayer meeting. Because again, we believe that it's collectively, it's what we do together. It's how we spur each other on to love and to good deeds. And so we're going to gather together virtually, and one of our pastors is going to lead us in a devotion, in a corporate time of prayer. And it's not required, but it's going to be a great opportunity for you to engage. So that's going to be a part of it. And this is James mentioned in the video, as this whole thing wraps up around right before Easter, we're going to host a 24-hour prayer gathering. And 12 hours of that's going to happen here on campus. 12 hours of that is going to happen virtually. We're going to have kind of prompts to lead you through a guided prayer experience. And we want everyone to sign up. We want as a church to be able to cover that 24-hour period in prayer together, asking God to continue to pour his presence into this place, the work and the ministry and the lives of the people who are here at Lake Sawyer Church. We want you to participate with that. We're also going to ask you to fast, and I understand like some people are like, I don't ever skip a meal. What's wrong? Why am I skipping a meal? Like this is not something I do. And even with fasting and with prayer, there's a lot of questions and uncertainty around it. And that's why we're launching a website today, lakesawyerchurch.org/21days. lakesawyerchurch.org/21days. And on that website, we have teaching videos about what is prayer and fasting all about. We have articles that are worth reading. We have resources that are available for you. We have a prayer guide that we're using in partnership with another church that has like 15 different prayer models to help you engage with the text differently each and every day. We want that to be there for you as we live and walk and pray through this season together. But the only thing I'm going to ask you to do today is to sign up. To go to lakesawyerchurch.org/21days and sign up. And I know that there's probably 1,000 things that you can say, 1,000 reasons why you don't have time for this, or you're just too busy, or maybe you've done prayer things before, you've done maybe fasting things before, and you've never ever experienced anything from it. I'm going to ask you to sign up because I believe collectively that this will be a powerful, powerful experience, not just for our church, but for you individually. And we can't experience it as a church if you don't choose to participate as an individual. And so trust us. Trust me. Most importantly, trust God in what he wants to do through you over these 21 days. As you commit to return, as you commit to draw yourself back to him in his presence in your life every day. Go to lakesawyerchurch.org/21days to sign up. I say this a lot. I'm not talking to the person next to you. I'm talking to you. Make the sacrifice. What is easy is not always what's best. So choose what's best. Choose to prioritize this experience over the next 21 days and see what God does in your life. Now, as we walk through this as a church, one of the other things we recognize is there are 3 weekends that that go over these 21 days. So we want to intentionally create spaces and opportunities for us to pray as a part of our services. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. In just a second, Maddie here, she's going to sing a song. And I think the song is so fitting to what we've talked about. And it helps remind us, for many of us, of our journey and where we have wandered and strayed. And so as we sing this song, as she sings this song, I should say, I want to ask that you would just engage with God in this moment, online or in this room. That you would just say, God, I want you to fill my life with you. I want my focus to be back to you. It's an opportunity for us to apologize to God for how we've allowed our minds and our focus to wander. This time is for you. And if you're new to this church thing, you've never prayed before, then this might be the only experience in your whole week where you get to stop and reflect. And I just want to allow, if there's like prayer's not your thing, I want these words that Maddie's singing, I want them to just wash over you. Because I believe in these words, Jesus will be speaking to you. So this is your time. This is your space. We invite you to pray with us. When the song's up, I'll come back up and wrap our time together.
in your presence, and I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings, 'cause Jesus, you don't owe me anything. And more than anything that you can do, I just want you. And I'm sorry when I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I just sang another song. So take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. And I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. So take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. And I just want you and nothing else, nothing else, nothing else but you. I just want you and nothing else, and nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you and nothing else, nothing else, Jesus, nothing else will do. I just want you, nothing else, nothing else, nothing else will do. Come back to where we started. Come back to where we started. When I first felt your love, you're all that matters, Jesus. You're all that matters. Caught up in your presence, and I just wanna sit here at your feet.